10 deathbed confessions and conversions that went horribly wrong. The prior second passage is regularly one of truth. Some withering individuals utilize that chance to address their blunders, in any event the ones they can address, appreciate their friends and family, and treasure their best minutes. They may likewise uncover their most profound privileged insights and most prominent laments and adjust their beliefs. We have seen kicking the bucket individuals do this load of things. Nonetheless, a few affirmations have turned dubious, particularly when it includes the disclosure of a mystery, after the individual endured. Envision admitting to a homicide before the cops when you think you are biting the dust yet you end up surviving. Other confessions have gotten quarrelsome after the perishing people apparently took on new beliefs. They died, yet the alleged deathbed conversions regularly caused debates that waited on long after they were no more. 10. James Washington. In July 1995, firemen found the roasted remaining parts of a lady in an unfilled home in Nashville, Tennessee. Police later distinguished the lady as 35-year-old Joyce Goodiner, who had been wounded and pounded into the ground. Subsequently, the killer had set her body in a carpet prior to setting it on fire. Police captured James Washington for the homicide. He knew Joyce and even conceded that he saw her on the day she passed on. Nonetheless, police couldn't nail the homicide to him as there was no DNA proof at the wrongdoing scene. Things changed in 2009 when James Washington endured a coronary episode while carrying out a 15-year punishment for endeavored murder. Expecting that he planned to kick the bucket, Washington called a close-by watch, James Tomlinson, and admitted to the 1995 homicide. Things went south for Washington when the coronary failure didn't demonstrate deadly. Tomlinson educated specialists about the admission, and Washington was accused of homicide. Washington abjured the admission and asserted that he was fantasizing at that point. Lamentably, it was past the point of no return. He was indicted for homicide and condemned to life imprisonment. 1. 9. Tony Wakeford. In 2006, Tony Wakeford endured a perilous ailment brought about by Parkinson's illness. Thinking he planned to pass on, he called his better half, Patricia, and admitted to taking part in an extramarital entanglements with her closest companion. Patricia didn't say anything negative and persistently paid attention to all he needed to say. Passing was close at any rate, she likely thought. They weren't right. Tony survived. However, Patricia couldn't contain the agony of treachery by her husband. This reached a crucial stage on September 4, 2010, when she killed him in their Effingham, Surrey, home. Subsequently, she called 999 and asserted that her husband had assaulted her during a battle. Police showed up to discover Tony's remaining parts. He had numerous cut injuries on his arms, hands, and legs. However, the one that demonstrated deadly was conveyed straight into his heart. Patricia demanded that Tony had assaulted her initially despite the fact that examiners accepted that she had killed Tony in a spasm of envy. A neighbor additionally told specialists that he had heard Patricia rehash the words, "I disdain you," for around 10 minutes on the day preceding the murder. 2. Patricia was captured for homicide. Notwithstanding, she lucked out after the court diminished the charge to homicide. She got a 582-day sentence yet was liberated on the grounds that she had effectively gone through 291 days in jail. 8. James Brewer. In 2009, Michael Anderson endured a stroke that he accepted and planned to kill him. At the medical clinic, he uncovered that he was really 58-year-old James Brewer. He had switched his name up 30 years sooner after he was pronounced needed in Tennessee for the homicide of his neighbor Jimmy Carroll. James shot Carroll to death outside a service station over doubts that Carroll was attempting to engage in extramarital relations with James's better half, who later changed her name to Dorothy Anderson. James Brewer was captured for the homicide, however escaped with his significant other just after he was delivered on bail. They went to Oklahoma, where they changed their names and began to live another life. James told the police that he had chosen to admit on the grounds that he needed to purify his spirit, prior to biting the dust. James was certain to the point that his time was up that he even advised his better half to quit meddling when she attempted to end his admission. Luckily for equity, James endured the stroke and was accused of murder. 3. 7. Unidentified 91-year-old man. In 2015, a 91-year-old British man living in Canada admitted to killing a lady outside a dance club on Carnaby Street, Soho, UK, in 1946. This is viewed as the longest period between wrongdoing and admission in British criminal history. The unidentified man offered the admission at a Canadian police headquarters just after he was determined to have malignancy. Canadian officials educated the British police, who speedily sent examiners to question the man. The casualty was a whore whose name the British man couldn't remember. Notwithstanding, he recalled that he had shot her to death with a pistol. When British officials showed him photos of a few ladies, the man recognized his casualty. She had been a 26-year-old whore called Margaret Cook. Police had never captured a suspect in Cook's homicide despite the fact that the man had stayed in Britain for a very long time prior to moving to Canada. Canadian police offered to remove the man to the UK. Notwithstanding, Canadian appointed authorities wouldn't respect the removal on the grounds that the man was excessively old. They likewise believed that a preliminary was superfluous in light of the fact that the homicide would have stayed inexplicable if the man had not confessed. 4. 6. Geoffrey Gauffour. In 1988, British police discovered the remaining parts of an abhorrently killed lady in a level in Cardiff, UK. The lady had more than 50 cut injuries on her body. She was subsequently distinguished as a 20-year-old whore called Lynette White. In 1990, Tony Paris, Yusuf Abdullahi, and Stephen Miller got life sentences for the homicide. Be that as it may, they were delivered 2 years after the fact after progressions in DNA innovation demonstrated they were honest. A couple of years after the fact, police turned their radar on a man called Geoffrey Gauffour. DNA tests before long demonstrated that Gauffour was the genuine murderer. In 2003, the 38-year-old Gauffour by one way or another understood that he was under police reconnaissance. He visited a few stores where he bought a lot of paracetamol tablets. He gulped the tablets when he got back that evening. Police broke into his home at that point and captured him. Gauffour admitted to the homicide as an emergency vehicle moved him to a medical clinic. He added that he had been anticipating catch for a very long time and truly needed to kick the bucket. Gauffour was at that point writhing when he showed up at the emergency clinic, and for once, it appeared as though he was truly going to pass on. That never occurred, and he went on to make a full recovery. Gauffour didn't abjure his admission. In any case, he said he was not, at this point, keen on biting the dust and was set up to confront the ramifications for his activity. He added that he had recently thought about death to find if God and Satan truly existed. Gauffour admitted that he had killed White during a dispute over £30. He got a lifelong incarceration and needed to go through 13 years in jail before he could be considered for parole. Notwithstanding, he is as yet in jail as his parole demands were dismissed in 2016 and 2018. He is qualified to document a third parole demand in 2020. 5. Sean. In 2018, a malignancy patient at Auckland City Hospital in New Zealand educated a specialist that he had a few confessions to make. He added that he would just unveil the data depending on the prerequisite that the specialist guarantees never to tell any other person. The specialist agreed. The man, distinguished uniquely with the pen name, guaranteed that he had been a firearm for an employer who was liable for a few homicides across New Zealand during the 1960s. The unidentified specialist later urged Sean to compose an admission for the police in the event that he passed on. It is indistinct if Sean composed that letter. The specialist maintained the mystery at any rate. Be that as it may, police found out about Sean after a few clinical and law analysts distributed a paper examining the good and lawful outcomes of keeping quiet. The paper produced a contention that split clinical experts into two gatherings. One upheld the specialist who stayed discreet, while the other needed the specialist to uncover it. The steady gathering noticed that privileged insights ought to never be uncovered on the grounds that they are viewed as a kind of connection among specialists and their patients. The gathering likewise referenced that Sean's condition improved after the admission. He had the option to walk and eat, two things he was unable to do before the admission. His well-being additionally improved altogether, and specialists even needed to diminish the measures of painkillers he received. In actuality, Sean was released and shipped off a nursing home for palliative consideration, which is held for passing on individuals. Specialists believe patients in palliative consideration to be critically ill. Their consideration is centered around making their demise less difficult. Sean later died. 6. Bjorn Ironside. Bjorn Ironside is an incredible figure, despite the fact that his reality stays in question. He was apparently a Viking lord who controlled what is currently Sweden at some point in the 10th century. He additionally served as a marauder and habitually coordinated astonishment assaults into urban communities that would now be situated in Europe and North Africa. One of his most notorious strikes happened when he collaborated with another Viking called Hastin to assault the Italian city of Luni, which they confused with Rome. The assault began with an attack. Notwithstanding, the pair immediately understood that the city was very much shielded against attack. So they chose to deceive their direction in. Sources say that either Bjorn or Hastin made an impression on the neighborhood diocesan in Luni, guaranteeing that Bjorn was on his deathbed and needed to change over to Christianity. Different sources say that Bjorn really pretended to be passing and had mentioned a Christian entombment earlier. Whichever is valid, the minister of Luni concurred and permitted some Viking pallbearers to convey Bjorn's body into Luni. Once there, Bjorn jumped out of his final resting place and battled his way to the city doors closed by the Viking warriors masked as pallbearers. Notwithstanding, they before long understood that they had assaulted the wrong city. 7. 3. Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin passed on in April 1882. Before long, there were reports that he had changed over to Christianity not long before his passing. The principal such cases were made during a message conveyed by one Mr. Huntingdon. Darwin's deathbed transformation is no joking matter since he proposed the hypothesis of development. The hypothesis pitched him against religionists who accepted that God had made the world and everything inside. This is the creationist hypothesis. The creationist and evolutionist hypotheses can't both be valid, in any event not completely. One must be bogus or just in part valid for the other to be true. Elizabeth Reed Cotton, also known as Lady Hope, reignited the gossip in 1915 when she announced that Darwin had truly changed over. Cotton asserted that Darwin was perusing a Bible when she visited him at his home. Darwin was seriously sick at that point and confined to bed. Cotton added that he had advised her to get back to impart a message to the workers in his home. Darwin's family kept on denying each story that Darwin changed over on his deathbed. His girl Henrietta was with him at the hour of his passing and never saw him convert. His better half, Emma, added that he couldn't ever have changed over. While they concurred that Cotton visited Darwin, they said that it was 7 months before his demise. Darwin was not out of commission at the time. 8. 2. Lord Louis XV. Ruler Louis XV was one French lord with an incredible desire for ladies. He became ruler at age 5 and wedded his significant other, Queen Marie Leczinska, when he was only 15. He before long became weary of the sovereign and discovered a few special ladies to fulfill his sexual urges. King Louis XV had his paramours live in the very castle that he imparted to his significant other. The paramours dwelled in various lofts that were connected to the ruler's room by a mysterious flight of stairs. The special ladies utilized that flight of stairs at whatever point the ruler mentioned their services. The lord's philandering ways nearly reached a conclusion after he was cut by Robert François d'Amiens on January 5, 1757. Thinking he was kicking the bucket, King Louis XV was raced to his royal residence where he admitted his betrayal to Queen Marie and vowed to uncover more subtleties in the event that he at any point recuperated. He improved, yet there is no notice that he made more confessions or unloaded his mistresses. 9. 1. Sir Allan Napier MacNab. Sir Allan Napier MacNab was a disputable lawmaker in early Canadian history. He was a handyman as he fiddled with business, acting, carpentry, land theory, and law during his momentous life. He likewise momentarily functioned as a warrior and even battled in the War of 1812. MacNab's life was loaded up with contentions, which proceeded after his demise. He owed heaps of obligation, leaving his leaders to battle about the couple of properties he had left. Be that as it may, the best debate included his confidence. MacNab was a famous Anglican despite the fact that his better half and girls were sworn Catholics. The discussion started after Sophia Stewart, his sister-in-law, announced that he had changed over to Catholicism on his deathbed. The Anglicans invalidated the cases and demanded that MacNab had kicked the bucket and should be covered as an Anglican. They added that the alleged change was inconceivable in light of the fact that MacNab was oblivious at the hour of his passing. The Catholics won, and MacNab got a Catholic internment. Be that as it may, the conflict left the family divided. 10.